Thank you very much for having me today. I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land upon where I sit, Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the land today, and I acknowledge that you sit on a Ngunnawal people's and Māori people's land at the National Museum. I lived in Canberra for 2 years, and one of my favourite places to go was the National Museum. It was accessible, it was peaceful, and it was also a place where great knowledge could be imparted. And on today, International Day of People with Disability, it is incredibly important to both look back at where we've been, but also maybe look to the future of where we're going. A good example of that would be the new Changing Places facilities that have been installed in the National Museum of Australia, which acknowledges the need for people with disability into the future. And it is a wonderful expression of an understanding of that we don't just look at the 90% of people, but 100% of people and what their needs are to ensure that they can be active members of the community. International Day of People with Disability is rightly celebrated across Australia and throughout the world because there is a need to understand the diversity of disability in the community. This year's campaign looks at people with disability who have hidden disability. That is, 80% of people in the community have a disability hidden by nature. It's important to acknowledge that not all disability is permanent, that disability may be different for each person, and that people with disability also have other characteristics, gender, sexual orientation, culturally and linguistically diverse background, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background, and they may live rurally and remotely. Today, what I wanted to though is to emphasise is that the role that the National Museum can play in creating pride in diversity. The first Disability Discrimination Commissioner at the Australian Human Rights Commission was a woman who has sadly passed away by the name of Elizabeth Hastings. Elizabeth Hastings was a wonderful disability advocate. She was a wonderful disability advocate because she got other people in the community to understand that disability is normal, that it is part of the human condition, that to have a disability is part of being human. And in doing so, that normalisation that she tried to create led to a lot of law reform, which still needs to continue, and a lot of policy reform, where we understood the importance of not having segregation in our community. When we segregate people with disability from others, we create an us and them mentality. When in reality, what the mentality should be is we the people of Australia. 1/5 of the Australian population approximately lives with disability. And approximately 80% of disability is acquired. What that means is that people with disability may in the future have changing needs, but also so may people in the community who do not at present have disability. That's why we need accessible building, accessible training, accessible communication, inclusive practices relating to the arts, sports and culture. And that education, that need to try and educate people of the importance of inclusion and diversity is something where the National Museum plays an incredible role. It can change viewpoints for a generation. It can enable people to understand where we've come from, but more importantly, where we're going. In terms of the key issues for 2021 for people with disability in Australia, there is quite obviously the National Disability Strategy, which is a 10-year policy document, which looks at all aspects of a person's life. And within the National Disability Strategy, to learn from the failings of the past, we need to develop a National Disability Data Asset, which will ensure that we can measure the actual inclusion within the community, plan to have not just good policy, but great policy. But following COVID-19, I think there's also an aspect where we have to look very closely at other areas of the lives of people. They include how they're viewed in the community and awareness rating. Again, the National Museum plays an important role. Housing, and ensuring that people with disability can live independently and safely in the community. And finally, employment. We want to make sure that people with disability don't just have a job, they have a good job. They don't just have a role, they have a career. And for that to occur, we need to have organisations like the National Museum change. I'm a great lover of reading widely on disability culture and looking at the development of the disability human rights. And while I was doing some research recently, I tuned into the television. And on the television, Joe Biden stepped to the lectern. And he said in his acceptance speech of the US, for winning the US presidential election, we must make the promise of the country real for everybody, no matter their race, their ethnicity, their faith, their identity, or their disability. Ladies and gentlemen, the National Museum plays an important role in making the country real for people with disability because it can educate generations. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. The music and dancing has been fantastic. I look forward to hopefully going to visit the National Museum when I'm in Canberra again. Thank you very much.